So we're going to move into Thomas Gagliano, who's an independent therapist, and he has two books, The Problem Was Me and Don't Put Your Crap in Your Kids' Diapers, because the cleanup cost can cost a lifetime. I think I got it right. And he has these wonderful books, and he has a lot to say, and he has his Instagram. So with that little introduction that I gave, I don't want to eat into your time. Thomas Gagliano, can you take it away?
I absolutely can. First, I want to thank you, Deborah, for having me on. I really am honored to be on your script conference. I think it's amazing the work you do and how you help other people. It's amazing sometimes how we put a little light in somebody's life and how we change the messages for all the families that can carry those messages to their children. So I'm honored and I thank you. So my name is Tom Gagliano. I have a master's degree in social work. I'm a family dynamics expert. As Deborah said, I have two books that are best-selling books, and I'm proud of those books. I have a CMAT certificate in drugs. I am also a keynote speaker. And my experience and expertise comes from overcoming my own difficulties. I am a recovering addict. That experience and insight is what has guided me in the methodology I use in my groups with couples, with individuals to help them find a better life. So addiction's a funny thing. You know, addiction's a disease that tells you you don't have a disease. It's very powerful. It's very cunning. It's just very baffling. Our cemetery is filled with people that thought they could handle their addiction. That's how powerful it is. So before I get started here, I want to explain that in this presentation and next presentation, it's important to understand the solution to the problem of addiction. Because if we don't understand what the problem is, it's tougher to understand what that solution is. See, we're not responsible for our childhood wounds or the trauma we received in childhood, but we are responsible for healing those wounds. And why? Because we'll never find happiness and we'll never find peace with the people who love us if we don't. The solution is making the healing process a we process, not a me process. The obstacle is those who have suffered trauma, as I did in our childhood, stop trusting people for our solution. But the solution is starting to trust the healers in our lives. So what happens, unfortunately, is when trust or emotional intimacy comes into our life, a time traveling piece comes in where we stop trusting those healers in our life because we time travel back to those who hurt us in our childhood. And what do we do in our adult life is we sabotage the intimacy in our life. So let me stop for a minute and tell you what you're going to hear in this presentation and tomorrow's presentation. We're going to learn why egocentricity and fragmentation is the root of all destructive actions, whether it's addictions, bullying, domestic violence. All of those things come from egocentricity and fragmentation. I will explain that in detail in a little while. What else are you going to learn? You're going to learn why addicts turn away love and help when family and friends offer it. Doesn't make sense. Well, I'll teach you why and how to help them. Learn why addiction is so powerful that only trusting others as your coping mechanism is the key to freeing yourself from that bondage of addiction. Also, educating the co-addict and others to learn the difference between loving the addict to health and enabling the addict to stay stuck in their addiction. See, this presentation will confirm that without healthy emotional connections in childhood, the individual will never trust anything but addiction as their coping mechanism in adulthood. Never. They will become emotional cripples, and addiction will become the intimacy substitute. See, healing is an ongoing process of self-determination and self-discipline. While the rewards are not always immediate, the beautiful gifts await us if we allow ourselves to take direction from the healers in our life. Not until we stop denying our past and begin sharing our wounds will we free ourselves from the bondage that those wounds have on us. I know I never allowed love in, not because the people around me didn't love me. It was because I didn't love me. And if I didn't love me, nobody was going to get close. The common problem we face in addiction or all acting out behaviors come from unhealed childhood wounds that remain buried inside and eventually come back to haunt us when we have emotional intimacy in our life. We become afraid, become scared that people will see us for who we are inside. It's a falsity, but we make it believable in our life. And that's what stops us from allowing love in. Only when we permit the window of our past to be opened, exposing the core of our adult difficulties, can we begin the healing we process. If we did receive negative messages in our childhood, or we were traumatized, as I was, from sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, what happens is inner voices develop in our life that imprison us, reminding us that we're not good enough. Childhood wounds are reopened, isolating us from others. And in many ways, we play roles that hurt ourselves and those around us. We wear masks to hide who we really are. The little voice inside us make us feel ashamed and unworthy. We become self-centered, causing us to feel that we have the right to act out with addictions or whatever we do, regardless of the pain it hurts ourselves and those around us. Now, these inner voices are so powerful that they imprison us to play these destructive roles, and we listen to them. Sometimes we act in ways that do not always make sense as we hurt those around us. We feel compelled to listen to the destructive inner voice in our head, making sense of our actions. It's like figuring out a jigsaw puzzle. It doesn't make sense. Why do I hate the people that love me the most? I don't understand. So the first step is to seek help in order to understand what is broken inside. It's very important. So about 20 years ago, I left the world of business and I started to help others that, one, were sabotaging their happiness by their childhood wounds and their childhood experiences. And two, to give my children what I didn't have as a kid, a safe place, a place to share their feelings. So I'm going to take you back a little bit to a story that helped me understand this. I remember when, it was probably about 25 years ago, we had to put our dog to sleep. And my oldest son was very close to this dog. He loved this dog. And I remember when we came back from the hospital after we put the dog to sleep, and I walked into his room. And I said to him, "How you doing?" Now, I had a father who, if I shared feelings or, God forbid, cried, he called me his little girl. That's what he called me. And I remember I walked into his room and I said, "Hey, how you feeling, kid?" He said, "I'm all right, Dad." Well, he didn't stop there. I put his arms around me and I put his head on my shoulder and I allowed him to cry. Within a few seconds, he was crying his eyes out. So I was giving my son a safe place, a place to cry in his father's arms, a place I never had as a kid, a place I was giving my son, to help him understand that he can make mistakes in life. Doesn't mean he is a mistake. And if he fails in life, it doesn't mean he's a failure. These are the messages that I want to give my children. And I started to run groups in my house and in other areas to try and help other people who are sabotaging their life by addiction. See, addictions are symptoms. They're not the problem. If an addict doesn't work on what's broken inside of them, or somebody that has domestic problems with anger or rage or bullying, they're never going to get better. They have to fix that brokenness inside, or they're going to just pick up another addiction or another negative acting out action. It's like switching seats on a Titanic. Doesn't make a difference what seat you're sitting on. You're going down. So the brokenness inside is what has to be fixed. You see, everything begins in the home. Childhood messages. The messages we receive in our childhood dictate the roles we play in our life, the intimacy we have or don't have, our parenting skills, the careers we choose. Those childhood messages that are handed down create those intrusive inner voices that I said before. Now, those messages can be verbal or nonverbal. They don't have to always be verbal. Or looked at a mother or father give their child of disappointment has a profound message behind it. Be aware of that. So the messages that get carried down show us, again, how we view the world and how the world views us. And it solicits a tsunami of negative voices and recordings that will be with us our whole life, our whole life. As a recovering addict, I had to heal what was broken inside of me in order to allow myself to be loved. Unless we look inward, we are not capable of seeking outward. We're too distorted. Our filters are too messed up. We will sabotage love and happiness when it comes our way. When a child doesn't feel like they matter to their parents, it's not their parents they stop loving. It's themselves they stop loving. Children are taught we should love our parents. We should never get angry at our parents. Very profound message and hard to challenge when you get into recovery. Wait a minute, I got to get mad at my parents? They're supposed to love me. Of course. It's not about bashing parents. It's about understanding the messages you received from them that has impacted your life. So I talk a lot about egocentricity. Let's talk about that because it's very important. When a child is young, the world revolves around them. All children. It doesn't make a difference what diversity you are, rich, poor, religion. No, they're all the same. Their brain has not developed enough to have empathy and have other things. For me, when I was young, for instance, and my father was out and not coming home at night and coming home drunk, and I was that kid that stood at the top of the stairs pulling my father off my mother because he was a very angry alcoholic. I never said my father suffers from this addiction called alcoholism. I said, what's the matter with me that my father doesn't want to be with me? What's the matter with me? So when I was abused by a religious figure, I couldn't go home and talk to my parents about it because I felt like I was defective and they would only reinforce that. So there's two problems. One is when you're abused, it's bad enough. But then when you can't go home and talk about it, it's twofold. I'm not safe enough. Somehow I know something's wrong with me. Now, in our society today, we have another problem. Parents work, single family parents, two parents. We're working hard. We're doing it for the right reason. We're trying to get our kids to a better school, find a better place to live, but understand your children may not see it that way. Again, egocentricity. Maybe they're seeing it that you don't want to be around me enough. Have the conversation with your children. Don't assume you know how your children feel. That's egocentricity. The way they see the world may not be the way you see the world. I talk about this all the time, and I'll talk about this when I speak on parenting tonight as well. They may not see the world the way you think they see the world. You may be doing your best to make it a better world for them, but if their brain is not established enough, they may see it as, why don't you want to spend time with me? Very important what egocentricity is. Listen, you ever see a little kid grab a toy from another little kid? Because they only care about what they need. My son told me at 5 years old, Dad, what are you getting me for Father's Day? Egocentricity. It's all about them. So when you're not paying enough attention to your child, whatever the reason is, your child may feel like they're not important. Please, if you take anything from this presentation, take that with you. Very important. That's what egocentricity is. Now, we see kids today getting addicted to digital products. We see kids 11 years old watching porn. You know, social media is great. We get out there to everybody, but it also has its disadvantages. Children are getting addicted to digital products. They hear the tweet, they hear the phone message, that little jingle. They see the computer. They're becoming addicted to computers and digital products. Please, parents, teach them to have personal conversations with you, okay? Because if they get addicted to digital products, later on, they're going to find other addictions that are far worse. So pay attention to that. It's important to learn to talk to your children and to have personal conversations with them. It's very important. So let's go back to other addictions. So addicts are emotional cripples, and the addiction becomes an intimacy substitute. They have a void inside. They can't talk to their parents or caregivers or whoever's there at a young age about their addiction. So what they do is that hole gets filled with some kind of addiction, whatever it is, drinking, gambling, sex, working, could be anything. I had most of them. Thank you very much. So the addiction becomes a distorted form of oxygen to them. And they develop destructive entitlement, somehow giving themselves permission to act in ways regardless of the harm it causes others. So we spoke about egocentricity, how the child absorbs everything that it's their fault, even in a divorce. And I'll talk about that in my parenting presentation. Addicts are fragmented. Let me explain what that means. It means they break into two selves, presenting themselves with one self to the world and hiding their inner self. That defectiveness inside, nobody's going to see that. And they carry that into their adult life. That's why when they get emotional, intimate, that's when they really close up. Two selves, presenting themselves as one self. Now this fragmentation, fear of being exposed, is what leads to addiction. They begin creating masks to protect themselves. Now, addicts come in all different forms and shapes and sizes. Addiction's not prejudice. Trust me, it's not. But underneath the inner self, we all have a common thread. All addicts feel like they're just not good enough, and nobody is going to see that part of me. Nobody's getting close. That's the common thread with all addicts. So what do I do in my sessions, in my groups? Is I try to get them to expose that inner self, to trust that it's okay the way they are, that we love them with all their pimples and bumps. That's what I do in my groups and in my individual sessions, to know it's okay. Get naked and you're okay with me, buddy, or him or her. It's okay. You're loved exactly the way you are. See, addicts don't believe that. They believe that if they show their pimples and warts, they're going to be dejected, they're going to be judged, and they're going to be put down. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of my story as we learn what creates the solution. So again, I said earlier, I had a tough childhood. I had a mom that used to take me to hotels to catch my father with other women. I had a father that was multiply addicted, and yada, yada, yada. So I was abused by a religious figure in school. I went to a school that had a PA system that when the principal called a student down, the principal would beat the heck out of the student, and it would be put on the PA system so everybody can hear it. Fear. That's all I heard was fear. So what happened to me? I was a bully. I was always in trouble. I picked up every addiction. And to be honest with you, if it wasn't for sports, you would not be hearing me today. I would have been done. At least sports was something that I can turn to that wasn't destructive. So as I went through my life with my addictions, I went into business being a workaholic. I made it a fortune in business, except I lost 2 fortunes in my addiction, and my wife left me. Not surprising. So I will tell you that at this point that when I got myself into 12-step programs, into therapy, my father was in Alcoholics Anonymous for many years, and he was a very different person. He became a wonderful grandfather to my children, believe it or not. And that's the hope I want people to hold on to. No matter how down you are, there's always hope if you allow yourself to be a part of another solution, a healthy solution. Please hear that. Please hear that. So as I was walking through my recovery program, my mother called me one night and said to me, listen, your father had cancer and it spread and he's very ill and he would like to see you. Oh, intimacy, emotional intimacy. So I went to see him one night in the hospital. And I remember walking in there and I remember seeing a priest walking around and I said, listen, do me a favor. Go talk to my father. He's got no spirituality. He doesn't believe in nothing. But talk to him. Maybe you can help him. Yeah. He said, sure. I'm in the hospital. He came out of the room and he said, is that your father? The guy, hooked up to all the morphine and everything? I said, yeah. Because that guy's got more spirituality than anybody I know. I said, what? Him? He said, yeah. I walked into that room. I sat down. I started talking to my father. And we're talking about sports, news. And I got up and he grabbed my hand. He said, Tom, sit down. I want to talk to you. He said, I was sitting where you were sitting 20 years ago, and I was talking to my father. He was dying of cancer, lung cancer. So I never could tell him I loved him, and I never could tell him how I felt about him. I don't want to die and have that on you. Whoa. I'm like, oh my God, this is intimacy. And let me tell you the one thing about addicts that I teach in my groups. We don't know how to regulate conflict. We don't know how to regulate feelings. We don't know how. We run to anything that can medicate that feeling. Addiction, drinking, drugs, sex, anything. We don't want to sit with those feelings. We don't know how to handle it. And I didn't either. And I got up from that hospital room. I grabbed my father's hand and he pulled me close to him and he started to cry. I never saw my father cry, other than the time when he used to beat the hell out of me when he was drunk when I was younger. And he would always come in crying and saying, I'm sorry, what I did to you. Yeah, right. This time, these tears were real. I walked out of that hospital room and I remember saying to myself, I'm in trouble. I don't know how to regulate this. I want to go back to my addictions. And I said, God, please, please help me. I can't handle this. I don't know how to handle this. And I was right on the cusp of either going back to my addiction or going to my other coping mechanism, my group. And out of the elevator at the hospital came one of the guys that were in group with me. He just was walking out of the elevator and he was visiting somebody else that day. And I went and I hugged him. I know he must have said, gee, Tom, I didn't know you loved me so much. I needed somebody that night. And God sent me somebody that night. And I hugged him, and I remember shortly after that, my father had passed away, and I went to the wake. Here's the miracle. In that wake, there were people from my groups in therapy, and not therapy, in my support groups that were there for me. They came to the wake. I didn't even tell them my father died. Here's what's important. I felt important. I felt like I mattered. Maybe for the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered to another human being. That feeling I never felt before. So when that happened, that's when I started the road to helping other people. I started again to run groups in my house and churches, 12-step groups, because that's what I knew, until I learned how to handle childhood messages. And I learned how those messages just imprison us to the life we lead.
Tommy, I got to stop you right there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to do that because you had such a lull in the room and your voice is very soothing. But anyone who wants to go into Q&A, can you let me know by telling me in the chat or raising your hand? Tommy has 4 more minutes that he can wrap this up, and then you can go ahead and join the Q&A because we have, after Tommy comes in, we have the Lee Sunday Evans coming in with the waterfall exhibits. So please let me know. Tommy, you have 3 minutes now to wrap all of this up. Thank you.
You got it. So let me go right into what I'm going to talk about tomorrow night. So tomorrow night, I'm going to talk about my groups and how I help my groups, how I help couples, and how I help those in individual sessions. All members need to grow in handling the tools of communication. It's very important, communication. Addicts or not, many of us don't know how to communicate. We don't know how to share our feelings in an empathetic way. We don't know the difference between sympathy and empathy. We don't know the difference between codependency and helping the addict get better. We don't know the difference between selfishness and self-care. We tutor back and forth with that. So tomorrow, we're going to get into more of the solution in groups with couples and individuals. We'll do more of that tomorrow night, and we'll get into that. So I want to, first of all, tell you that if you want to hear more of me, you can go to The Problem Was Me. That's my website. And you can hear my podcast on The Problem Was Me. And we also did a little 40% off on my digital products tonight. If you put in Script Conference 20, you get 40% off of my digital products, and you can get a free book. You have to pay for the shipping and handling. And I'm done with all my stuff. I'm very uncomfortable whenever I do this little baloney here. Anyway, in tomorrow's session at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, I'll discuss why the group process not only gets addicts to stop their addiction, but to stay stopped, where they, again, learn to regulate their discomfort, their challenges in life, not with medicating it with addiction, but finding other witnesses, other people that know their truth, that will give them the unconditional love that they didn't receive in childhood. And also to understand how the co-addict is showing up in the addict's life. Are you helping them get better, or are you enabling them to stay in their addiction? So we're going to talk a lot about that tomorrow night when we discuss more of the solution, So again, just to finish up, and Deb, I'm just about done with what I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to make it clear that addicts are emotional cripples, not because they want to be, because they're afraid to allow people in. And what I teach them is to trust healers in their life again and walk through the obstacles that tell them that they're going to get let down by those healers. The time traveling process. And we do that with role playing in the group process. We do it with understanding what the addictive ritual is. Every addict has a different addictive ritual. We do it with understanding the time traveling piece when we make our spouse the voices of our childhood caregivers, because at the end of the day, we're all in relationships, not with the people in our lives, but with their childhood messages, and they're in relationships with our childhood messages. So Deb, I think that's it for me right now. So if you want to,
okay, so anyone who wants to go into Q&A, please let me know. You can also get Tommy's books. There was something in the chat for that. I put a link in there. You can get them at the Script Bookstore on Dr. Deborah's Things and More.